Maybe you're a scientist, a researcher, an engineer. You've got big problems to solve, and you'd use cluster systems to solve them if only clusters didn't require specialized IT staff to set up and maintain. Well, now they don't. Unlike in the PC world, HPC clusters start with software. Whether the problem revolves around geological modeling, fluid dynamics, meteorology, or crash simulations, a buyer starts with picking the right software tool for the task.
And a very typical problem is when you're building a car or components in a car, what happens when it's in a crash? You can have two cars coming together, and depending on how they hit, different materials contract at different rates. And what you can do is you can model that so that you can make a better car.
Whatever your cluster size, you want hardware that's certified to work with your applications from initial install through years of expansion. That's how clusters are supposed to work in the real world. You start with a half rack and outgrow it. The next year, a full 42U gives you some headroom. Then you outgrow it. So how can you certify a cluster solution? After all, these are incredibly complex systems integrating dozens of different component types, and that complexity is multiplying over time as the solution scales.
A cluster is a stack that's built on a pyramid starting with hardware at the base level of the pyramid, and that's the physical infrastructure that is the power, the racks, the servers, the storage, the networking, and the interconnects. On top of that, you have the operating system and the clusterware. On top of that, you have the libraries and tools that allow for the machines to work together collectively as a single unit. And on top of that, there's the application, the actual reason why the cluster is developed and deployed.
Unfortunately, this pyramid of pieces hasn't always worked. The HPC industry needed a set of specifications that everyone could follow and use from the component design stage through post-sale support. With everyone on the same page, all parties could have confidence that the total solution would work. Today, we have this confidence thanks to the Intel Cluster Ready program.
The Intel Cluster Ready program is about certification of the whole cluster solution, starting with the hardware and going up into the software level. We make sure that all these different components, hardware and software, work perfectly together.
At the heart of this program is Intel's Cluster Checker, a diagnostic application that scours every subsystem and interconnect within the cluster. If there's a memory problem, buggy driver patch, or a loose cable, Cluster Checker will find it. The tool tests performance and functionality within individual nodes, as well as between all nodes in the cluster. Of course, sometimes it pays to have a computer scientist on hand. When your HPC software vendor recommends an Intel Cluster Ready system provider, you want a world-class hardware partner like Silicon Mechanics, because a total solution is about more than a collection of hardware components. You want confidence that your supplier picks the right components from the best manufacturing partners. How much work does the supplier put into testing and optimizing these pieces and making sure that they perform together flawlessly? Does your supplier deliver the level of prompt, personal, expert support you need long after the cluster is installed? And perhaps most importantly, how well does the wisdom learned in testing, assembly, and support departments get passed on to sales staff so that you can be better informed during the sales process and end up with a product that fits your needs exactly?
If we know the overall reason why the user is deploying the cluster and they give us the performance benchmark they're trying to hit, then we can map the hardware choice, either from an energy perspective, from a price perspective, from an overall performance perspective, or from a facilities perspective.
Silicon Mechanics' website makes cluster configuration incredibly easy. Simply select an Intel Cluster Ready cluster and optimize with whatever customizations you like, from CPU voltages to memory sizes to the total number of nodes. Add the configuration to your shopping cart and get a price. Human sales experts can assist at any point, but that's about as hard as it gets. Still, when you're dealing with something as complex and critical as a cluster, system badges and vendor promises only take you so far. You want proof points, real-world, hands-on demonstrations that your hardware works with your software.
As we were doing this proof point test with Silicon Mechanics, we're trying to understand what the user would be going through in their actual application.
In the real world, clusters run different apps on different days, but without a common set of specs, this often leads to code conflicts and other problems. Now, with Cluster Ready in play, you can have one custom-built cluster running HPC apps from 6 different vendors perfectly. This proof point is the final step showing how the Intel and Silicon Mechanics collaboration creates dependable cluster solutions fine-tuned for real-world needs.
Proof point allows us to focus on delivering solutions to people versus the numerous small details that might otherwise get in the way. It accelerates our capability to work with all of these independent software vendors' applications and deliver solutions to a much broader audience.
Once the cluster is running, you can still use the Cluster Checker tool to monitor the system's health and make sure it's still performing as expected. If trouble develops, anything from a loose cable to a faulty patch update, Cluster Checker can pinpoint the problem in minutes and eliminate days or weeks of troubleshooting. This way, your system stays in optimal cluster-ready compliance.
The product is much more reliable than before. You can trust the solution, you can have confidence in that solution. You can actually concentrate on your problem you want to solve. You don't have to mess around with the cluster system. You don't have to spend money and time on the system to fix it or to keep it up running, to maintain it. It just works.
Confidence and simplicity are the name of the game here. With the Intel Cluster Ready program backed by providers like Silicon Mechanics, high-performance computing solutions are within reach and ready to run.